The FUD just does not seem to stop when it comes to the UK. Every time David and I switch on the news, all we seem to hear is more rumors that Bitcoin is getting banned. Now, last week, we spoke about how the rumor that spread that Bitcoin was getting banned for political donations was actually just pretty much a wives' tale at this stage. There was no legislation. There was nothing formally documented, just two politicians saying that they were discussing it and considering taking it forward. Well, the same thing seems to be happening again this week, as there's been regulatory news coming out of the UK that many people think is negative. But Dave and I are going to show you that actually, once again, surprisingly, it's exactly the opposite. Welcome to 1% BTC. I'm Dominic, and this is David, and today we're zooming back to the UK. Once again, none of this should be considered financial investment, tax, or legal advice. We are just two guys who love talking about Bitcoin on the internet. All investing is risky, and investing in Bitcoin and digital assets is extremely risky. Although we try and provide balanced feedback, our models and our data can be wrong or out of date. Please do your own research before making any decisions.
And just a reminder, just a reminder to like and subscribe, because we always like to hear from you guys. We've been receiving really encouraging feedback and requests for things to put into our stories, so please continue commenting.
Absolutely. Cool. So today's story: the UK government has confirmed that crypto firms will be fully regulated, no one likes that word it seems, under the Financial Conduct Authority from October 2027. So this will cover all exchanges, all custody, wallets, issuance, and stablecoins. It sounds very threatening. The framework, however, aligns the UK with a certain other, I'll say, unions model. Now, I'll let you take a guess as to what framework that may be, David, in a sec, once I've taken you through a few things. But essentially, what the story wants you to think: the crypto is being legitimized, not banned. Yeah, surprisingly, despite the headlines and despite whenever we see the word regulation, it seems like a negative. Regulation actually equals maturity. If you actually read any of these articles, they're focused more on reassurance and, believe it or not, a level of cautious optimism. So people see the headlines and they're instantly switched off. But actually, if they were to just, in this case, read the articles, or better yet, use our tool, request us to run these type of articles through, you can see that actually there's a fixed implementation date, and it may sound restricted to retail users, but it's actually pretty neutral. So what are the actual facts? The UK is legally commits crypto firms to FCA regulation from 2027, specifically October, and the FCA will supervise crypto firms. Wallet providers will be included, stablecoins will be regulated by the Bank of England, and trading in custody will also be covered. The rules will be finalized by the end of 2026. It applies UK-wide, and I've actually sport my own question for you, David, because surprisingly, from the wording and the language that's being used at the moment, it's not actually aligning that closely with MiCA, which is the European Union's approach.
Interesting.
It's actually aligning more in terms of the wording that the tool has pulled out. It believes that the actual structure or the way it's pitched is more like a, hey, we're going to try and align with the US and their way of doing things. And I'll explain why that is later. But in terms of, once again, what people misunderstand when they actually see these type of headlines is the UK is banning crypto. Once again, it is not. It is regulating crypto. They are two completely different things. The second belief is that even though people that understand there is a distinction between banning and regulating, they believe that it kills innovation. It doesn't. It provides legal certainty. Legal certainty lets people know the names of the game they're playing in, and they can act accordingly. You may not like it, but institutions love it. Yeah, they do not like uncertainty. And the final claim is one that I've heard, I saw actually a couple of posts about this, saying the UK is going to make sure that Bitcoin specifically is illegal. It's like, no, Bitcoin is unchanged. It's completely unaffected. So, David, where do you think this ranks? Now, bear in mind, last week, one of the biggest news items that we've actually scored was the UK's previous news that they'd decided to categorize digital assets as a third type of property, something which hasn't happened in hundreds of years. Well, there's never been a third type of property in the UK until a couple of weeks ago. So that scored a high 5s. So where do you think this will score?
Wow. You know, when I first saw the article, it made me think of, okay, the only reason why the government is imposing regulations is so they could tax the public more, that they could increase kind of regulatory oversight to clamp down on evading taxes. That's what I initially thought. But once kind of you explained the facts, essentially what this is all about is boosting consumer protection and transparency of crypto, which has been, we all know that what is very negative for crypto and the wider markets is uncertainty and lack of clarity. What this does is it provides clarity and provides a regular framework that's actually, I mean, the UK is playing catch up, right? The US is so far ahead of the UK in terms of regulations and supporting it with a regulatory framework. UK is thinking, you know what, we need to catch up. And this does it. So I'm actually quite bullish. So I'd give it a 3, not as high as previous, because this is about from October 2027. This is still a proposal, if I understand it correctly. It's not that this will, this will come into force definitely. Is that correct, Dom?
So they're committed to doing it from the sounds of it, and because it's coming from the FCA, it's going to happen. The FCA just don't announce things like this. There will be a form of market structure, call it crypto framework, effective from October 2027. But you're right, it's not happening right now.
Okay. So I'd give it a 3. I'd bump it up from a 2 to a 3, but 3. Yeah. I'll stay with 3. What did you initially think?
I put this really high, actually. I put this as a 5 or over. I think I put it as a 5.1 when I ran the guess when I was reading the articles.
Wow.
My reason for that was essentially because it's coming directly from the FCA. Now, don't forget they and the Bank of England. It shows joint policy between the two organizations, which are heavily intertwined anyway. But the fact that they're actually saying, hey, we're not going to just align with MiCA. Yeah, we're going to actually try and form our own regulation, and we're actually going to try and make it pro-growth. And it was one that I was actually correct on. So the narrative obviously frames it as the regulation as legitimacy. There's, in terms of the facts, they're strong. It confirms no ban, only legal alignment. Now that is a huge thing. It's saying we're not going to outlaw Bitcoin. We're just going to try and get rid of some of the bad actors. It's a high certainty regulatory legitimization event with long-term institutional benefits and manageable short-term friction. Now, in order to understand that, like, because I queried the tool on this and I said, no, hang on a minute, justify to me, why this is the case, like why this story is seen as good, because I thought our viewers could work with actually understanding like some historical events. So let's look at this. Back in 1986, there were the Big Bang reforms, which led to which seemed that they were going to be bad, because obviously, once again, it was more regulation. But actually what it led to was deregulation in many ways, which in turn helped make sure that London maintained its dominance of the financial markets. Yeah. Second one, post-2008, what you hear is that the FCA's regime is tightening its grip over financial markets. That, once again, sounds horrible. But once again, institutions love that. It restored the trust that they needed in the government and the financial system in order to continue going. And the same things when it comes to e-money and payment services. The UK's use of like these well-defined rules tends to lead to fintech expansion, not it decreasing. So this actually tends to help financial innovation when they lay things out in very, very clear terms. So the UK tends to operate in a way, let's put it this way, in a way that is clear, principled, and regulation, and they specifically seem like they're trying to word it in a way that is going to attract capital and not suppress innovation. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And going also back to what you said about institutions, this makes it very safe and it gives the approval stamp, the stamp of approval to institutions, and that's where the big money is, right? So
and think how much money is floating around the city of London, despite the fact that the British no longer rule the world, as that many of them still think they do. London is still arguably the financial hub of the world, and there is a lot of money in the city of London and wider London. And you're right, it will. Institutional participation, in my eyes, will be unlocked. It's going to enable banks and funds to get involved in the same way that the current acts that the US are putting through and the support by the government is helping to do with that. Whether it's the letters from the OCC, whether it's the strategic reserve announced by the Trump administration, whether it's the Market Structure Act, which is obviously pending. All these things in the US are making it very clear what that administration's response is going to be to Bitcoin and the crypto market. Now, this is doing the same for the UK. Now, the reason this scores so highly is because of the historic background that London specifically has. And those big banks that operate out of London would be looking to do the same thing. So it basically supports Bitcoin's integration into global finance. So you're right that it's far off in the future. They're not going to confirm what's going to be in there until late 2026. But the tool has pointed out in this respect, it doesn't matter, because what it's doing is reducing that systematic uncertainty, which overall raises resilience of Bitcoin. The fact that they're saying, we've told you now we're not going to ban it. It's off the table. Banning is off the table. So the worst case scenario that many of these crypto holders, and it seems like everyone in the UK that sends me a message seems to think that everything's a ban. They've just told you we're not going to ban it. We're going to regulate.
And when you take a kind of a step kind of out, and you look at the larger macroeconomic kind of frameworks, this legal framework will align more closely with the U.S. regulatory approach, right? And when you compare it also with what Europe's doing, their bespoke, MiCA regime, what the UK is doing is they're saying, hey, we are catching up with what the US is doing. We don't want to be left behind. MiCA doesn't quite do it for us. We want to be very clear that we actually are protecting our consumers, our citizens, and that we, as you said, we're not banning it, we're supporting it, actually. We're protecting you. Yeah.
And I think, as I said, what came out of it was the USA's recent actions. So we've spoken over the past few weeks about a few stories that came out of the CFTC. We've spoken about some letters that came out of the OCC, those interpretive letters. All that adds clarity. And the outcome has been institutional entry. That is what we have seen. Look at the past 2 weeks alone, where we've had all those stories about Bank of America, Charles Schwab, Vanguard coming into the market. Well, MiCA, on the other hand, as we've seen with the story with Poland, where the president vetoed their inclusion of MiCA, and that's still going on. We spoke about that, I think, last week. The reason he's done that is because they see it as too compliance heavy. It's going to lead to a slower rollout, and Poland is saying, for one of many reasons, but I think they're saying, we do not want to be the one that stifles innovation. The rest of Europe may be going that way, but we're not going to do it. Yeah, it seems like, if you think about it this way, the US's model is more like integration. We're going to make it part of the financial system. EU's kind of more like containment. We're going to allow it, but it's going to be so heavily regulated. We're going to make sure that we control everything about it. And eventually that will believe that at no point in history has that type of legislation ever served countries over the long run. They've always been outpaced if larger players do. So fair enough, if you're the biggest player and you're setting the rules, that can work, but not when you've got competitors like the US making these counter moves to basically say, well, actually, we're going to encourage it and to make people want to come here. And if the UK follows that suit, I think it'd be very good for the UK.
Exactly.
Now, there are some downsides that I should quickly point out. Higher compliance costs. Obviously, anytime regulation comes in, it's going to make it more difficult for these smaller firms to operate. They may have to be certain things they have to do, like KYC, AML, which makes things more costly to them. It could therefore slow retail onboarding if a lot of these firms actually choose to leave the UK as a result. But I think they'll be the smaller firms. I think the larger firms will grab this with two hands and praise the Lord that this has happened.
Exactly. When you look at the numbers, there's an estimated 7 million UK adults in the UK, right? So that's about 12% of the population that own.
So you mean crypto holders?
Yeah, crypto holders.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Yeah. I wanted to finish the sentence. Sorry.
10% is higher than I thought. That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, it was 5 million in terms of crypto adoption amongst UK adults. It was about 5 million in 2022, and now it's increased to 7 million currently in 2025. So that's quite strong, quite a high number of adoption. It's growing, and the regulations are kind of catching up to support that adoption.
Absolutely. So obviously this is built off a couple of stories. Like, it's been clear from what I've seen over the past few weeks that it's been building towards this, whether it was the reclassification of property or the UK basically saying, hey, we're going to actually start to consult the wider crypto industry and bring them in, when previously we've kept them at arm's length and said, no, we don't need to consult you, we make the rules. So I think we started to see a thaw, and I think it was very clear that they were going to make a move like this, but it's just great to see it come from the FCA, the Bank of England, and show that they are actually going to be sort of hopefully encouraging these crypto firms and fintech companies to get involved, and obviously opening up the way for Bitcoin. So I wouldn't see this, once again, because I know people will get in the comments, people saying, well, why isn't the price moved? Because once again, it's a multi-year adoption infrastructure story. It's not a price is going to move as a result of this tomorrow.
Good point. Yeah, so even though the tool marks it as incredibly bullish, 5.7 is quite high.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of the UK's state in the world, because the UK, its history with financial markets and its sway is huge. So any news that comes out of the UK is going to instantly be higher than, say, a Germany or a Brazil or a Thailand. Of course, it's going to be higher. Is it going to be as high as the US? Are they going to watch it as closely as the US? No, the US will always be predominantly, US and China will for the foreseeable future be the ones that move the markets, really move the markets. But the UK, I would say, is definitely top 5, if not top 3.
Excellent.
So stuff like this really does help. In terms of, before we let the audience go, this is definitely one that you should watch. And specifically, I would look for a couple of things. I would look for the draft legislation text. So obviously we want to confirm the scope of it, the spot, like we know it covers spot trading, custody, lending, staking, etc. But you want to be looking out for any exclusions. You also want to be looking out for any oversteps. So also we mentioned the consultation is happening over 2026. So best to keep an eye on that, and obviously look for any kind of wording around enforcement posture. Are they going to go stricter than we thought? And that is it. David, any final thoughts to the audience before we go?
No, I think we've seen a flurry of activity from the UK, and especially from the regulators. So this is hot off the heels of the ETN being approved and institutional investors gaining access legally to crypto related products. So it's great. It's great to see and to expect more of it. So yeah,
absolutely.
Quite a good week for the UK.
It has been quite a good week, despite the price, guys. And don't forget, the reason that you need to watch this stuff is because the true movement in Bitcoin, forget the price, it's happening in the background with these industry players. Because if you don't pay attention, you'll be like the rest of them. Because most will miss it, most will mock it, and most will wait until it's too late. But the 1%, they're with conviction.
Be a 1%er. Thanks folks.
Guys.
Bye-bye.